Ruth, and that is why I cry. I cry because nothing will ever bring them back again." She sobbed afresh, but more gently, for his kind words soothed her, and softened, if they could not take away, her sense of desolation. "Come away. I cannot have you stay here, full of painful associations as these rooms must be. Come," raising her with gentle violence, "show me your little garden you have often told me about. Near the window of this very room, is it not? See how well I remember everything you tell me." He led her round through the back part of the house into the pretty old-fashioned garden. There was a sunny border just under the windows, and clipped box and yew trees by the grass plot, farther away from the house, and she prattled again of her childish adventures and solitary plays. When they turned round, they saw the old man, who had hobbled out with the help of his stick, and was looking at them with the same grave, sad look of anxiety. Mr Bellingham spoke rather sharply. "Why does that old man follow us about in that way? It is excessively impertinent of him, I think." "Oh, don't call old Thomas impertinent. He is so good and kind. He is like a father to me. I remember sitting on his knee many and many a time when I was a child, whilst he told me stories out of the Pilgrim's Progress. He taught me to suck up milk through a straw. Mamma was very fond of him, too. He used to sit with us always in the evening when papa was away at market, for mamma was rather afraid of having no man in the house, and used to beg old Thomas to stay, and he would take me on his knee, and listen just as attentively as I did, while mamma read aloud. You don't mean to say you have sat upon that old fellow's knee?" "Oh, yes, many and many a time." Mr Bellingham looked graver than he had done while witnessing Ruth's passionate emotion in her mother's room. But he lost his sense of indignity in admiration of his companion as she wandered among the flowers, seeking for favourite bushes or plants, to which some history or remembrance was attached. She wound in and out in natural, graceful, wavy lines between the luxuriant and overgrown shrubs, which were fragrant with a leafy smell of spring growth. She went on, careless of watching eyes, indeed unconscious, for the time, of their existence. Once she stopped to take hold of a spray of jessamine, and softly kiss it. It had been her mother's favourite flower. Old Thomas was standing by the horse mount, and was also an observer of all her goings on. But while Mr Bellingham's feeling was that of passionate admiration mingled with a selfish kind of love, the old man gazed with tender anxiety, and his lips moved in words of blessing. "She's a pretty creature, with a glint of her mother about her, and she's the same kind lass as ever. Not a bit set up with yon fine manty maker's shop she's in. I misdoubt that young fellow, though, for all she called him a real gentleman, and checked me when I asked if he was her sweetheart. If his are not sweetheart's looks, I've forgotten all my young days. Here, they're going, I suppose. Look, he wants her to go without a word to the old man, but she is none so changed as that, I reckon." Not Ruth, indeed. She never perceived the dissatisfied expression of Mr Bellingham's countenance, visible to the old man's keen eye, but came running up to Thomas to send her love to his wife, and to shake him many times by the hand. "Tell Mary I'll make her such a fine gown as soon as ever I set up for myself. It shall be all in the fashion, big gigot sleeves, that she shall not know herself in them. Mind you tell her that, Thomas, will you?" "Ay, that I will, lass; and I reckon she'll be pleased to hear thou hast not forgotten thy old merry ways. The Lord bless thee! The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon thee." Ruth was half way towards the impatient Mr Bellingham when her old friend called her back. He longed to give her a warning of the danger that he thought she was in, and yet he did not know how. When she came up, all he could think of to say was a text. Indeed, the language of the Bible was the language in which he thought, whenever his ideas went beyond practical everyday life into expressions of emotion or feeling. My dear, remember the devil goeth about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Remember that, Ruth." The words fell on her ear, but gave no definite idea. The utmost they suggested was the remembrance of the dread she felt as a child when this verse came into her mind, and how she used to imagine a lion's head with glaring eyes peering out of the bushes in a dark shady part of the wood, which, for this reason, she had always avoided, and even now could hardly think of without a shudder. She never imagined that this grim warning related to the handsome young man who awaited her with a countenance beaming with love, and tenderly drew her hand within his arm. The old man sighed as he watched them away. "The Lord may help her to guide her steps aright. He may, but I'm afeard she's treading in perilous places. I'll put my missus up to going to the town and getting speech of her, and telling her a bit of her danger. An old motherly woman like our Mary will set about it better nor a stupid fellow like me." The poor old labourer prayed long and earnestly that night for Ruth. He called it wrestling for her soul, and I think that his prayers were heard, for God judgeth not as man judgeth. Ruth went on her way, all unconscious of the dark phantoms of the future that were gathering around her. Her melancholy turned with the pliancy of childish years, at 16 not yet lost, into a softened manner which was infinitely charming. By and by she cleared up into sunny happiness. The evening was still and full of mellow light, and the new-born summer was so delicious that, in common with all young creatures, she shared its influence and was glad. They stood together at the top of a steep ascent, the hill of the 100. At the summit there was a level space, 60 or 70 yards square, of unenclosed and broken ground, over which the golden bloom of the gorse cast a rich hue, while its delicious scent perfumed the fresh and nimble air. On one side of this common the ground sloped down to a clear bright pond, in which were mirrored the rough sand cliffs that rose abrupt on the opposite bank. Hundreds of martins found a home there, and were now wheeling over the transparent water, and dipping in their wings in their evening sport. Indeed, all sorts of birds seemed to haunt the lonely pool. The water wagtails were scattered around its margin. The linnets perched on the topmost sprays of the gorse bushes, and other hidden warblers sang their vespers on the uneven ground beyond. On the far side of the green waste, close by the road, and well placed for the requirements of horses and their riders who might be weary with the ascent of the hill, there was a public house, which was more of a farm than an inn. It was a long, low building, rich in dormer windows on the weather side, which were necessary in such an exposed situation, and with odd projections and unlooked-for gables on every side. There was a deep porch in front, on whose hospitable benches a dozen persons might sit and enjoy the balmy air. A noble sycamore grew right before the house, with seats all round it. Such tents the patriarchs loved. And a nondescript sign hung from a branch on the side next to the road, which, being wisely furnished with an interpretation, was found to mean King Charles in the oak. Near this comfortable, quiet, unfrequented inn, there was another pond, for household and farmyard purposes, from which the cattle were drinking, before returning to the fields after they had been milked. Their very